I wanted to take a moment and talk about Anchor, the platform that allows you to have a platform. Today, I'm able to speak my truths, knowledge, and experiences and be fulfilled at them all, simply based on the app called Anchor. It's made it easy, it's made it fun, it's taken the work out of being able to be artistic and getting my view out to the world. If you have something to say and don't know where to go to say it, Anchor has your back. Not only will you be able to record, publish, and be in control of our artistic views, it will also help you place your podcast on many other platforms as well. I love it. Shout out to Anchor. Before we got into this episode, I wanted to say happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. It's late, so belated Valentine's Day. I send my love and light in everybody's direction. Now, we got a dope episode coming up, so let me drop this intro. Welcome to Lovespell's podcast. I am Lovespell, hoodoo practitioner and conjurer of root work, student in divination, light worker, spiritual healer, and advisor, and most of all, I'm brought to you here directly by my ancestors and guides. Up in here, we're going to be mixing up a little potion of love, life, and liberation. Ingredients includes, but is not limited to, a handful of black spirituality, a dash of mental health issues and how to heal from them, sprinkling in a little bit of black history with a dollop of getting to know thyself. We're going to be stirring up the pot on all things black, and this brew is lit and on the fire. So as we go through this learning journey together, let's set our intentions to awaken the oppressed, address, and digress. Let's talk about it. Toxic behaviors come from trauma, but usually cause more trauma over time. Today, we will challenge ourselves to recognize what is toxic behavior, the difference in toxic people and toxic behaviors themselves, how to change these behaviors within yourself, and how to avoid toxic people or the toxic behaviors in people when you see them. Today's episode is called My Name Bee's Chernobyl. Let's talk about it. The word toxic has become an overused cliche statement. We use it to refer to anybody who exhibits behaviors that we don't like or we determine to be distasteful. The truth about it is that toxic behaviors or toxic people behaving in this way usually are exhibiting behaviors that we all have exhibited at one point in time in our lives. Usually they're just amplified to the point that they become extremely distasteful. But the behavior itself is distasteful whether you do it a lot or a little. I'll give you a list of some major toxic behaviors that are not all of them because there's so many, but are ones that we all have come to know, and we always think of the drastic side of it. When doing these even a little bit can alter, destroy, or manipulate a relationship. So here's the list. The first one I have is lying and continuously lying. Manipulating. Being quick to anger. Being clingy. Being controlling or insecure. Being argumentative. Financially manipulating a person. Ghosting people or having a push and pull relationship, where you're all in for a little bit and then you pull back just to see how they'll react. The silent treatment. Emotionally unavailable, or being emotionally unavailable rather. Being emotionally manipulative. Yes, there's a difference between the two. Being chaotic. Cheating. Gossiping. The abuse of alcohol or drugs. Creating pity parties for yourself. Being sexually manipulative. Being a serial monogamous, someone who's in one relationship after another. They also call that one being in love with love. Stalking, people pleasing, being selfish, feeling entitled, being arrogant, being jealous, playing the blame game or finger pointing, holding grudges, being stubborn, attention seeking, or playing victim. Okay, so we all know these to be toxic behaviors on the drastic side, but most of us are not willing to admit that we've exhibited a multitude of these behaviors in lesser, more palpable, doses. We only do them with certain people during certain times for certain reasons that make it more excusable. Yet it does not make it any less toxic. Just more explainable, I guess. Now, there is a difference in being a toxic person or having toxic behaviors. I'll get into that a bit more down the road, but having one or more of these traits at a particular time in your life does not automatically determine that you deserve a space in the toxic person category. No. And most times, these behaviors do not rear their ugly heads or bring themselves into your consciousness until they are triggered, usually by another's toxic trait or a toxic person, or by things that trigger past trauma. For most people, they couldn't connect the dots or have the idea of their own behaviors being toxic. I mean, that's like, in our society, toxic is such a taboo thing that it's the equivalent of being called hideous. So, in order for you to spot toxicity, you must first start by recognizing them in others. This can be tricky. Most of the time, a person doesn't start off with heavy hitters. No. It's subtle toxic behavior that glides in, testing out the waters to see if it's warm enough to swim. For example, a toxic person might start off by consistently being the victim. But they usually come to you and pull and test on your heartstrings, offer you some sob story. It always seems like their problems in their life is harder than everyone else's, and that they've endured such excruciating pain. They'll appeal to your nurturing side and then use that to their advantage. On the opposing side, a toxic person can also be cut off, cold, elusive. This might come off as mysterious to you. But over time, the wall that a person has created may actually become impenetrable. These people can trigger behaviors in other people. And a person who consistently nurtures or people pleases, will try to fix, love, or help the victim mindset person, thinking they can love them past their hardships and pain. Both will be in this toxic push and pull the victim consistently finding more ways to be a victim, while the people pleaser will find many ways to solve the current problem. This game becomes exhausting, and both create resentment towards each other, ironically. The cold, elusive person may trigger the toxic behavior of a person who has felt shut out by an important figure in their life, like a mother, a father, or some kind of caregiver. They will find this person intriguing, interesting, and feel that they need to get behind the wall, only to find it impenetrable, and only getting glimpses of the person behind the wall, creating an illusion of wanting but can't have. This makes a person believe that the thing that's behind the wall is way more valuable than it actually is. I.e., the person behind the wall being of higher stature because they seem so unobtainable. Now, the person becomes clingy, insecure, and further pushes themselves away. The difference in a toxic person and toxic behavior is toxic behavior is only done within a certain time frame with a certain individual, and is usually a trigger behind something that's going on. Toxic people exhibit the same behaviors no matter the relationship, no matter what's going on, no matter the situation. That's the difference. Now, on this journey of light working and spiritual healing, I have come across a lot of people who exhibit toxic behaviors. A lot of people don't agree that they have toxic behaviors because they feel like they're out of love. They believe that these behaviors are not to harm people. And I think the main thing that people forget is that you yourself are a person. And the behaviors does harm a person, it harms yourself. And we don't associate self-harm as a toxic behavior. We put it in a different category. So when you're a people pleaser or a clingy person or somebody who endures mental abuse, emotional abuse, or any of those, behaviors from somebody else, we don't consider the enduring to be toxic as well. But if you go for strictly what is a behavior that is sabotaging, a behavior that is manipulating, a behavior that is harmful to an individual, a behavior that makes a relationship fall apart or unhealthy, enduring certain behaviors fit into all those categories. It's self-sabotaging. It's manipulating yourself into believing that you're in a different relationship than you're in. And these things harm yourself and not the other person or not other individuals. And therefore it doesn't get as much, it doesn't get pointed out to people as much. But a toxic person would be unable to continue their unhealed trauma and transgressing that on other people if they didn't have another toxic person or the ability to manipulate people's toxic behaviors. If those things did not exist, the toxic person would therefore have no choice but to unexist because they would be unable to foster relationships where they can be toxic in them. This is not by no means to say that the person who is exhibiting toxic behavior as a reaction to being in a situation with a toxic person is to blame or at fault for the toxic person's behavior. No, not at all. But what I'm saying is do not feed the stray cat. Do not poke the bear. Do not allow or having an understanding of what toxic people look like, how they behave, and the telltale signs of a toxic person will stop you from being the person who has to be in a relationship with this type of person, the person who ends up reacting in this type of way in the first place, and thus feeding this person's ego. I think one of the saddest parts about it all is that every toxic behavior and every toxic person, the behavior itself comes from the ego's reaction to some sort of trauma. The ego turns around and manifests a behavior as protection. But that protection comes about after the trauma and all other situations during fear. So although they haven't experienced the trauma again, they're overprotecting themselves because they're fearful that they might experience the trauma again. They've decided that whatever this is going to incur the same trauma eventually. So I'm going to stop it now. I'll give an example. You meet somebody and you guys hit it off. You're like friends, like not even in a more of a platonic relationship. You guys are friends and you hit it off real good. You guys are going places, doing things like, you guys just get along really well. You're talkative, tell each other all your business and secrets and stuff like that. It's just going well. And all of a sudden, you haven't talked to your friend in a while. And you start, you call like, hey, girl, what's up? Whatever. Hey, dude, my dude, what's up? And the person is real short with you. They give off this funny vibe. Now, the first thing any non-toxic or normal person is going to do, and I don't like to use the word normal. I'll take that back. I'll say non-traumatized person in that category. They're going to think, what did I do? Because self-evaluation is the very first thing a person who is not in toxicity at that moment will do. So the first thing you do is you'll say, what did I do? Or you're thinking, what did I do? And you might not say that to your friend, but you're thinking that. And you haven't really for sure. Maybe they're having an issue. Maybe they're going through something, whatever. You gave up all these excuses. Like maybe they're, got something going on. And I'm making it bigger than it really is. So I'm going to give them their space. But you missed the friendship and you're worried about what's going on. So you give them some space and then you contact them again. You try to, rekindle the fire that was under your friendship. And when you talk to the person again, they're still very cold. They might even say some hurtful things, be catty or rude, just icy. And so now you've come to this conclusion, like, what the hell? Like, what is really going on? And so you might even have an argument. You might even get into, what the hell did I do? What's your problem? And the person I don't have any problem. It's you. Like, you're going back and forth and you're confused as hell because you don't know where did the situation go wrong. The truth about it is the situation went wrong in that person's mind out of fear. See, what ended up happening at some point, the person who is a toxic person was thinking about the friendship and how much fun they're having and how great it is. And it reminded them of something that led to a traumatic event before. And so they realized that if they stay on this path with this friendship, that one, it may be too good to be true. Two, I'm running the possibility of being hurt again in the same manner. So I should cut this off before it gets to there. And then they become elusive. Now, here's the thing. They confirm their beliefs by the other person who is non-toxic fighting for the connection. Once the non-toxic person becomes clingy and argumentative and trying to figure out because they are confused, because they feel at a loss, because they feel at a lack, because they're reacting now, that is confirmation for the toxic person that this friend was actually the problem in the first place. It is a complete psychotic illusion that has been created by the person themselves. Now, here's the thing. It seems diabolical on the side of the non-toxic person. But I've come to realize that it's so much more of a harder life to live for a person that is in consistent fear of everybody failing them to the point that they sabotage themselves out of anything that makes them happy. That is what toxicity does in your life. Not only is toxicity something that's born from trauma, but it's also something that's passed down from family member to family member. there's plenty of households where the whole household is toxic. And it's funny because the child that becomes the black sheep will be the child who refuses to partake in toxicity. But there are so many different levels of toxicity and so many different things that can be turned into toxic behaviors or toxic people. There, for example, mothers who allow their children to witness them being verbally abused creates toxicity. And I don't mean bitch, slut, whore type of abuse. I mean belittlement. Where the person, the male figure makes the woman feel inferior, or like she's not worth much, or like he's doing her a favor by being there with him. That creates toxicity in the children that are in the household. Toxicity comes from adult parents that leave their children to fend for themselves. Leave them to be crabs in a barrel, scrounging for any scraps they can get. That makes them type of people extremely selfish, feeling like they need to finesse everybody, not understanding the give and take in a situation. Households where the young men are taught to be extremely promiscuous. That's toxic. You're teaching your children to go off and harm and hurt other people's daughters or sons. Households where the young girls are taught to, take from men. That's toxic. You're teaching these young women to be basically whores, manipulators, and users. It's toxic. But there's not just the behaviors themselves that are toxic, but there's something else that's really important. It's like toxic cheerleaders. People who don't understand a situation that's going on, that egg on, agree with, yes man, the toxic person. That's the thing about taking or listening to somebody tell a story about their issues, or especially an issue with another person, or ask for help or guidance with an issue with another person. There's a reason why there's professionals. There's a reason why there's light workers. There's a reason because the individual person who hears a story from a friend or a coworker or something where they think like, oh, well, this is a good person because they only know them in a certain light. When a story is told by this person, they're going to tell you the story from their perspective, especially a toxic person, because the toxic person will never take accountability for any wrongdoing. And even if they do have to admit that they've done some wrongdoing, they will always minimize the amount or the magnitude of that wrongdoing. So this man could have beat the crap out of his wife or girlfriend, and she's hiding, won't come around, and he'll tell the story as if we got into a little fight and she hit me and I hit her back, and now she won't let me see my kids. When really he pummeled that woman till she ended up in a hospital, and now he's got a restraining order against him. But when I'm sorry to laugh, but I mean, that's how the magnitude could be so big of a difference. And you on the outside looking in, you've never seen this man hit a soul, but he's not smacking his female coworkers because he wouldn't be working there that long and he'd be in prison. He's not going to walk around with I smack bitches on the front of his forehead. So the point of the matter is that people need to be very careful about egging on the toxic person's behavior, because he'll tell the story in his version because he needs that ego boost. because he's searching out for someone else to validate his behavior. And that's the same for women. I'm just saying but it's the same for women, because women are just as equally toxic in certain situations. So they need that ego boost. But there's a big thing that you need to worry about or keep an account when someone comes to you and tells you stories about their situations or talk to you about their situations. People telling other people's business, even their own spouse, and especially detailed personal information to someone who's considered more of a stranger or an acquaintance, is toxic behavior. That is the start of knowing that someone is toxic. Because why are they talking about this personal information to a stranger, someone who is not personal? Why aren't they speaking this to, a closer relative or the person that they're talking about? They're looking for validation. They're looking for an ego boost. And they're looking for something to say that their behavior is correct. Beware of egging on someone who is conducting toxic behaviors on someone else. Okay, so let's address the denial in ourselves. 1, all of us exhibit toxic behaviors. Every single human being on this planet Earth has exhibited toxic behaviors, because every single human being has an ego, and every single human being's ego has attempted to protect themselves from a hurtful event. That's what toxicity is. Now, are you a toxic person? Well, if you have manipulated a situation in your favor, regardless if it harmed the other person, if your ego or you feel good, let's say that, when somebody begs, is crying, is hurt, or feels is clingy or needs you in any type of fashion, if you feel bad about a situation, but can turn around and convince yourself that it wasn't really that bad, or that you don't need to apologize, or you do not need to make amends because of this, that, and the third. If you have ended relationships with people because you thought they might do something. If you have been a person who were all in a friendship, relationship, and all that, and then you just turned around and decided to be cold, and that person did nothing to you, that person didn't become any different than they already were, then you are a toxic person. You're not the most horrible person in the world. But the next step that you need to work on is addressing what trauma is leading you to being that type of person, that hideous individual. Now, let's be clear. Fixing your toxicity is not to save someone from you. Because believe you me, a person will recover from not being in a relationship with someone who intends to do harm. You're actually becoming a blessing by pushing someone out of your life that you had no intentions on being good to in the first place. The problem is that the fixing of your toxicity behavior, the you being a toxic person, is to save yourself. You will push everybody out of your lives until you have no one. You can ostracize yourself. I know people don't believe that because they're young and because you meet people every day. But in my profession, I pick up elderly individuals all day that have no home to go to, no family member that cares, no spouse that is around. And I do not think that is because of some strange anomaly. Now, I won't say that 100% of them are toxic people, but I'm sure a lot of them were. If you're toxic, if you're a regular person or a sensible person, I will say, who exhibits toxic behaviors during certain relationships, you need to figure out what is your triggers. Why do you keep encountering those type of people? Because there's some trauma that's drawing you into those type of people in the first place. Remember I said with the person who is got the wall up, you consider them to be mysterious. And people like that. It draws them in. But it doesn't draw them in for the right reasons. You want this challenge, but it's an unfulfilled challenge. You always lose in the end. And that's not really a challenge. That's just you putting yourself in a predicament to be hurt on a regular basis. And that's still toxicity. Because now you become this, perpetual victim. You're on this victim hamster wheel. So, when you're in a situation where someone starts to pull back and you start to run forward, catch yourself. I know for me, and my decisions with my life, I've decided that in a relationship, the best thing that I can do is have regular checks with myself. Regular checks on what's going on emotionally. Because what ends up happening is when most people get into a relationship, whether it be a friendship, a relationship, or even dealing with their own parents, is that you're so hung up on the behavior of the other person and what they're doing and what they got going on and why they're acting like this and why they're not acting like that, or blase, that you never do a wellness check on yourself. Schedule it. Once a month, once every 2 weeks, I am just going to take a pause and write down. Say it in my recording on my phone. Whatever you feel comfortable with doing. But how am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way in this situationship, relationship, friendship, parent ship, whatever ship you're floating on? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling these ways? Is it healthy behaviors that I'm exhibiting? And if they're not, why am I being triggered? Because when you do that, when you have an assessment of what's going on with you personally, then you realize what type of person you're dealing with on the other side. And for the people that you have to be in a ship with, you have to float along the river of life with, like your mother or father, who may be toxic people themselves. Because remember, I talked about the toxic families and the black sheep who was not toxic. Then once you know that these people are triggering certain things, then you take the remote from them. Once you're aware that a certain behavior triggers a certain reaction out of you, now you will never have that reaction because you know they don't have the button on that remote anymore. It's exhilarating. It's refreshing. And at the end of the day, it's you holding yourself accountable to your own happiness. It's you saving yourself from toxic people. Because toxic people will always exist as long as there's someone who can be. So I guess it's true to say that we are all toxic. But are you a waste? You have been listening to Lovespell's podcast. I am Lovespell, giving you gratitude and appreciation for your listening ear. I feel blessed to have had you as my guest as we stirred up the pot on all this mess. We've awakened the oppressed, addressed, And now it's time to digress. I'll be talking off your ear on the next episode. Bye for now.